We need to be good at sussing out.
You can do it from any point.
Let's collaborate instead of compete.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Mentor Nation podcast. I'm your host, yours truly, John Abbas. And today we have a great guest. I think he has a message relevant to all of you, which is why all of you should write your own book. And he's going to explain how to write one that sells a ton of copies. Now, if this is your first time here, I want to welcome you, say thank you for being here. And if you are returning, I just want to say welcome back. Regardless of whether you're here for the first time or you're returning, please make sure you take 2 seconds, hit that subscribe button. I just want you to get a notification every time I release a new episode, which is approximately every single week. And I have some great episodes coming down the pipeline that you absolutely don't want to miss. So bringing back to today's guest, his name is Andrew Kap. Just a really smart guy. I mean, he's extremely clever, very creative. He's written 2 best-selling books that are flying off the shelves all over the world. His first book is The Last Law of Attraction Book That You'll Ever Need to Read, which is a really great title. But I think his second book has an even better title. And his second book is titled 3 Words I Used to Sell 100,000 Books. I just thought that was a really, really clever. He's a master of marketing and copywriting. And in this episode, we dive into why all of you should write a book, whether it's just for legacy purposes, to pass something down to your family, to your kids, or whether you want to put your message out into the world, or whether you want to just become some prolific author, like some of the greats that are out there. But we not only cover why you should write a book, but he really dives deep into how to sell the hell out of that book. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're going to put all this time, effort, and energy into writing your own book, you don't want to just sell a few copies to your family and friends, right? You want to sell a lot of copies. And he has an incredible formula that has allowed him to sell tens and tens and tens of thousands of books consistently. And we talk about that today. So this is a great episode. I know you're going to love it. Sit back, enjoy, and take some notes. Andrew, welcome to the podcast, brother. I am glad to have you on, and I'm glad to have you share some really awesome insights with the audience today, man. So thank you.
Yeah, John, thanks so much for having me. Looking forward to seeing wherever we might take this conversation.
Which is going to be all over the place. So,
yes, in the best way.
Yeah, exactly. So for everyone listening, Andrew here has written 2 best-selling books. The first one being The Last Law of Attraction Book That You'll Ever Need to Read. I don't even know why I'm reading my notes. It's just behind you there. And the second book is a title that I really love, which is The 3 Words I Used to Sell 100,000 Books. And I think both of these are very interesting topics. And I wanted to start with the law of attraction because there's just a lot to cover there. It's an old topic, but it's just like there's a lot of new stuff around it. I'm excited to hear your take. But before I do, I always like to get to know the guests that I have on the show a little bit about just your background and story, what led you to become an entrepreneur, why you decided to go this path, if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, it's so funny because what you just asked, for most people, it's one story. For me, it's like a convolution of 4 stories. I want to try to be efficient in my wording here. I mean, the reason I wanted to become an entrepreneur is I grew up wanting to be an entrepreneur. I grew up wanting to be a comic book artist who worked for himself, because I used to follow people, Todd McFarlane, Rob Liefeld, Jim Lee, which if you know the comic industry, you know those names. And if you don't, you're like, who are those guys? But those are guys that started, a comic book company that finally competed with Marvel and DC. And Todd McFarlane in particular, known for Spawn, known for Spider-Man back when he worked for Marvel, very successful guy. And a lot of people think of him as a comic book artist, but a more informed mind thinks of him as an entrepreneur who happened to draw comic books. And even as a young person, I'd like closely follow the way he went about things, the way he went about speaking to his audience, marketing his work, getting his message out there, from buying, Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa and Barry Bonds home runs to get press to bring attention to his company, to a whole mess of other things. So I've always inspired by that. And just because I saw him do it so well at a young age, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, which kind of brings me to a funny thing where, pretty quick out of the gate of college, here I am trying to start a business in our production studio, trying to make things happen. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs could relate to when you're first trying to be successful, you are re-examining your own limits and you're going into
Right.
self-improvement modalities, one of which for me was law of attraction, which to be candid was very hit and miss. It was very inconsistent. And I wouldn't realize till about 4 years after trying it that it was really me who was inconsistent because I
Mm,
hit this really horrible wall where I basically gave up on the business or lost that business and lost my girlfriend of 3 years who broke up over text all in the same week. And I was forced to look in the mirror and say, Andrew, you've wasted your 20s. Something's got to change. Something's not working here. And I had this very weird simultaneous moment of epiphany and indignation where I said, listen, that law of attraction thing kind of worked whenever I actually did it and stuck with it and didn't quit. So you know what? I don't care what happens. I don't care when it happens, how it happens, why it happens. I'm going to go all in, which is another way of saying only 5 minutes a day because all day, every day, I knew was not sustainable. Just
right.
5 minutes a day of gratitude or visualization. And John, it was like a movie because once I made that decision and followed through, everything changed. 2 weeks later, I felt a hell of a lot better, a lot more than anyone with a broken heart at any business feeling. 3 months later, I'm in a brand new, healthy relationship. 4 months later, I'm making more money than at any point before that in my life. 6 months later, everything's different. I'm in the best shape of my life. I'm happy and fulfilled. And I basically learned the hard way that whatever you want to call this thing, we'll call it law of attraction. It works when you work it. But it wasn't
Mm,
until 11 years later that I finally decided, hey, I want to do something new in business. What can I do that will excite me, that will keep me motivated in every morning, answering emails, interacting with my customers and my readers? And that's where I gave myself permission to write this really bold, ambitious book and title because I figured with 1,000 law of attraction books out there, if you can't say something new, then there's no point to saying anything at all.
yeah, and I want to spend a little time here because this brings up a really interesting subject. I am a big fan of the law of attraction, but I think a lot of people just confuse it. A lot of people that teach it. A lot of people like exaggerate it, like The Secret, right? Like, just I thought it was silly that the guy goes into the parking garage and envisions a parking spot, and then magically it's there. But on the other side of it, I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs that don't understand it, that think that it's silly, or they're using it and they don't know that they're using it because they're not aware of it. And so I just want to get your take on the law of attraction, how you've used it specifically to create successes in your own life. And you
Mhm.
teach a lot of people. I mean, you have this awesome book on it. I just want to see if you could like maybe distill some of the most important things in that book for the people listening today.
Absolutely. And the thing about it is, when you have something like The Secret, which in 2006, it blew up.
Yep.
And when something blows up, it's a fad. And then when something is a fad, whether it works or it's not, or for all its pros and cons, it becomes a punchline. And once something becomes a punchline, your brain, so on a psychological level, you are not going to take it as seriously as you might need to for it to
That's right.
help you. My perspective on the law of attraction is, everything, we're all energy. This equipment's energy, your energy, I'm energy, including our thoughts. And the prevailing theory is like frequencies attract like frequencies. And if that's true, then you can actually be strategic by having positive, affirming thoughts and positive emotions around those,
Right.
focusing on the things that you want, which will bring it into being. Now, is it really that simple? Well, here's how I explain it. It's kind of like lifting weights to get muscles. Very oversimplified, but we get that. You
Yep.
lift weights, you get muscles, right? Well, here's two possible explanations as to how that works. Explanation number one is you lift weights and you go to sleep at night and the muscle fairy appears and waves a magic wand, and poof, you wake up the next day with muscles. Another, and I admit this is a butchered explanation, but another prevailing theory is when you lift muscles, you're putting so much stress on your body that your muscles are actually tearing in little areas, and your body responds by healing by filling in those tears with more muscle fiber, hence more muscle. Now, most people you ask that, they're going to say, well, if I have to pick one, it's obviously the second one. To which
Sure.
I say, it actually, unless I'm a personal trainer or a physical therapist, the answer doesn't matter. What does matter
Mm.
is you lift weights, you get muscles. You put in X, you get Y. And by that same token, if you focus on gratitude exercises and visualization exercises without some preconceived requirement or notion, or without trying to focus, just actually going through the process, by hook or by crook, things will happen. And doesn't mean that they'll
Mm.
magically happen for you. You'll be inspired. You'll take action, but you'll be inspired to take healthy efficient, strategic, intelligent actions. And, if people say, well, I still don't believe it, all I would say is feeling gratitude for 5 minutes a day is a win in and of itself. So if anything
Mm.
should happen, don't give me credit, don't give the universe credit, don't give my book credit, don't give the law of attraction credit, but at the very least, see that you did this thing and you got this result, and use it as an indicator or a motivation to just keep down that path, to see what happens and to see if you keep winning.
Man, I love that explanation. I really do. That's very, very, very powerful, very true, and just very simple to understand. So obviously, law of attraction is a very old topic. And I wanted to ask this even before when I was just reading your bio, like, why did you choose this topic to write a book on when there's a lot of other books out there and there's a lot of other topics out there? Like, what like pulled you to law of attraction? Just
Yeah.
because you used it and it literally changed your life? Is that the big?
Yeah, well, so the interesting thing was, like, again, I was a point in business where it's such a cliche, like you've got to love what you do, which is another way of saying, like, the whole reason that you're supposed to love what you do is because only when you love what you do will you be resilient and patient with yourself when things get challenging. It's not because it's a magical formula, it's because it keeps you
Right.
on point. I was saying, like, what can I do in my business that's going to keep me focused and
Mm.
enthusiastic? And here was this thing that was an integral part of my life that I never really spoke about. And hopefully I've lived up to the hype I've given myself, but I've always viewed myself as a somewhat decent teacher.
Yep.
And I've kind of like, I like taking concepts, assuming I understand them, that people make more complicated than they need to be, and simplifying them so that you could actually implement them and make them user friendly. I just like, listen, let me even know there's 1,000 books out there. Well, all that means is I have to raise the bar and do
Yep.
something that no one's done before in this topic or category. But since I know this is going to make me enthusiastic, it would be silly for me to make any other decision or go down another road when I know I'll just run out of steam.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So, it's funny when I first read your bio, my first impression of you was that you're just really, really great at marketing and creating catchy titles. Your website is fantastic. Awesomemarvelous.com. I think that's like one of the coolest websites names I've ever heard. Your books, they hook people. And so I just like, do you like you are a great teacher, but
Thank you.
like, do you put a tremendous amount of thought into the titles and these things like on
Yeah.
the very front end?
So here's the thing that your audience doesn't know about me yet. Part of the reason that I think that I was able to sort out this whole law of attraction thing, and again, here I've been an entrepreneur, is I've always been very intrigued and a student of human psychology and human nature. And I've been a copywriter, I've been a marketing consultant. So absolutely, there have been. I have to have integrity. I mean, I don't want
Right.
to name something if I can't back it up. Because,
Right.
by the way, spoiler alert, if I put a book out there and I don't back it up, I'll get killed in reviews. And luckily,
That's right.
the 5-star reviews speak for themselves for the book. But yeah, I am very intentional. In fact, titling my book, and we can go down this road because even if you're not a nonfiction author, there's value here for any business owner. There's a method to titling your book or titling something that is really advantageous to yourself and the end user. And I'm a
Hmm.
huge proponent of making sure that everybody wins, because it's only when both people win that's the word of mouth, that's the recommendations, that's the referrals, that's the growth in business, that's when things go viral. And
Right.
you haven't asked me, but just a quick little, just throw it out there and hopefully give this value. One thing I did with my book titles that won't solve anything, but it will hopefully be a good cue for a nonfiction author or someone who's serving people in some way, helping them solve a problem or challenge in their lives, is very thoughtfully and intentionally answering the question for the prospective reader of what's in it for me if I read
Mhm.
this book. You have to answer that question in the title, because otherwise they're not going to click on your listing. Not to throw
Right.
shade at Andy Frisella, who I think is a tremendous marketer, but
Yep.
his book 75 Hard, it does well because besides being an awesome book, he's got a podcast and millions of followers and the marketing, put capital to put behind it.
That's right.
If he is not somebody, if he's no name and he puts his book up on Amazon and someone's looking for the solution that book provides, they are not going to click on 75 Hard, because as good as that book is, it doesn't answer the question of what's in it for me if I click on this and find out more.
This
That's my
is
psychology.
This is a really great point that I want to have you speak a little more because it applies to everything. It's not even just books. Like there are so many books, there are so many restaurants, there are so many businesses, there's so many websites out there that the thing that people struggle with, because I own, a few companies here in Nashville, the thing that I struggle with is like, what do I name it? Like all the cool names are taken. I mean, you see all these little contraptions and devices, Uber, Lyft, and like they're constantly changing letters and moving things around so that they can use like a catchy name. But I just want to have you reiterate that philosophy because I think it applies more than just books. I
Yeah.
think that if you ask that question, what's in it for me? So to the business owner that's listening to this that wants to name everything from a business to a domain, could you just reiterate that philosophy that you just shared?
Yes, in fact, I want to give you a little more here. And I want to preface this that I'm not teaching everyone the way, I'm teaching people a way. So don't take this as absolute gospel, but hopefully this perspective will serve you.
Right.
Remember, I just said a couple minutes ago, I'm a huge proponent and student of human psychology. I think it's very important, especially for entrepreneurs who, like, by nature, we're a bit egotistical and confident. I mean, we have to be in order to move forward and have the confidence to do stuff. I
Right.
think we all, and I've had to do this for myself, you have to look in the mirror when you've got a book or a product or a company. You want to look good in front of your friends and family. It's not just about genuinely being successful, it's about everyone knowing that you're successful and everyone thinking in a good way of you. In other words, from the author perspective or any product perspective, people are looking for the cool sounding thing. But when you have something that's serving people, in my humble opinion, not the way, but a way, I think it's much more valuable than sounding cool is to sound useful. Because when you sound
Mm,
useful, the people that are looking for you will find you. That's why I say it's the last law of attraction book you'll ever need to read, because
right.
it's with the understanding that I used to be that person. So I know what it feels like to read book after book after book after book and get excited and start to use it. And it's a start to work and then quit anyway and wonder, why am I quitting?
That's
Answering
right.
that question, 3 words I used to sell 100,000 books. That's speaking, even though I said I did it, it's obviously speaking to the person who wants to sell those books because there's an implied understanding that they're going to take the information that I give and apply it and model it so that they can sell a lot of books. So I don't care about sounding cool. I care about
Mm,
sounding useful because that's where the connection comes and that's where I actually serve the end user.
I love that. And think that's a perfect time to pivot into books, writing a book. And that was what I wanted to gear most of this interview around because this is just a personal philosophy to me. I believe that personally, I believe everybody should write a book. Maybe not to sell a million copies, but there's very few things that it's a legacy, right? Like your book is your legacy. It's something that'll outlive you. It's like making a movie. It's like doing a lot of other things. And I think that there's a lot of, especially entrepreneurs, especially when they get to, I'm assuming you're in your 30s as well. I
Mm.
have 2 more weeks in my 30s and then I'll be 40. Um, but I interviewed this psychologist, world renowned psychologist a few months ago, and he talked about how, people when they hit their 30s, 40s, they go through this like midlife crisis where it's like purpose, meaning. It's not so much about money. It's like, what's a good life? What's a fulfilling life? And they start asking these questions and they start thinking about legacy. And I really think that writing a book is something that it'll pull a lot out of you, but then it'll allow you to live on.
Mm.
And I feel like if you're going to do it, well, why not chat with somebody that has a formula for doing it and also selling a lot of books? And so I wanted to just ask a list of questions that I have for you, not necessarily your step by step on what to write and how, because there's companies for that. There's
Mm.
ghostwriters, there's lots. But if you have some tips on how to write a great nonfiction book
Yeah.
and how to sell it, I would love to dive into that if you don't mind.
A- Absolutely. Well, again, I don't know if I'm paraphrasing you for you said the word, but we're talking about legacy here, right? We're
Right.
talking about looking back. And I agree, like, if you've got a book in you, like, get it out, but also you also want something where 40 years from now, you're not going to be disappointed in your effort. And no matter
Right.
what, we're always going to be our own worst critic, but the real measure is how well the people that read it, how well it served them. That's the true measure, no matter how
Right.
critical you want to be of yourself. Um, so with that understanding in mind, again, remember human nature, we want to look cool. We
Yep.
also want to sound smart. And I would caution people to resist that temptation because, again, from the perspective of a specific nonfiction book, I'm not speaking for all books, but a nonfiction book that shows you how to learn something, do something, accomplish something, solve a problem or challenge in your lives. Well, one, ideally, hopefully you have the answer for them, that you're not just writing a book to sound cool, but you actually have an answer for how to sell books, how to get in shape, how to sell houses, whatever it might be. Well, then the key to that is you're not going to serve the end user or the reader unless they get through the whole book. And they're not going to get through the whole book unless it's not a cumbersome process.
Hmm.
So remember I said I was a copywriter. I wrote both of these books as a copywriter. You don't know it. I mean, you'll hear it now, and it'll be interesting for anyone who reads the book after I said this. But the last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need to read is actually a 208-page sales letter. But it's not selling you on a product. It's selling you on your own ability to implement the content and simultaneously the ease and use of that content. Because only if the book helps people has it done its job. So my suggestion for people, and we're not all copywriters, but you want to do what you can to help the reader glide through your content in a comfortable way. For example, and I'm not sure if how many people are hearing this on audio or watching a video, and I'm kind of
Hmm.
holding this to camera, but you can see that the book that I have, everything's spaced out. I don't have like these big chunky paragraphs because if it's late at night and they're trying to read my book and it's big chunky paragraph, it's going to be cumbersome and they're going to be
That's right.
uncomfortable. I space it out. I'm conversational. I write the book as if I'm speaking to one person in a personal friend to friend conversation versus a group because that affects my cadence and my tone and the way I choose things. This does it automatically. It doesn't mean I have to think of how to do it, but by taking on that mentality, I automatically write in a more personalized way, which again will be more comfortable for people. I have a method to my madness where I'm trying to find the best way of presenting content where, okay, if there's 5 steps to this thing that they have to learn, which makes sense as the first step that they have to learn that the others build on versus a hodgepodge. In other words, my advice to people is be very intentional about what it's going to be like to read your book and not know what you know and have to learn it or experience it. When you do that, it changes the power and effectiveness of your skill, even if you don't see yourself as a writer.
How long did it take you to write your first book?
So, well, one, it's not my first book. It's my first book in this way. Like I've had prior failures, but it took me 9.5 weeks because I
No
was
way.
I was into it. And John, by the way, those weren't an easy 9.5 weeks. I mean,
Sure.
I woke up early, I stayed up late, but remember I was talking about law of attraction. Does it magically happen or is there inspired action? It's both. I took inspired action. I was inspired and motivated. And by the way, I had the title and the cover that I designed very early in the process, where every morning I would put the book up on the cover on my screen and I'd almost meditate on it and ponder it before writing a chapter. I was very intentional. But yeah, I knocked that one out in 9.5 weeks. Whereas this latest one, 3 words I used to sell 100,000 books, it was more daunting and I had a lot more on my plate. So probably took me 7 months because I would
Right.
write a chapter and then I'd have to take 3 weeks off because it was such an exhausting endeavor to make sure that that chapter was smooth and was seamless because I didn't
Right.
really write these books. I edited them. I put down horrible first drafts and then I massaged them like clay in a painstaking way, knowing that I wanted my reader to have a good, positive experience with it.
That's awesome. It's the same thing. Like I like to write screenplays in my spare
Mm.
time. And the first one, oh my God, man, like you're talking 3 years just to put down garbage. But, there's a lot of factors, right? Like if there's a story that really calls out to you, it creates inspire, right? And then like some days you plow through it and like write a ton of pages. I think it was James Patterson, best-selling author, that was like the lawyer beforehand. And this reporter asked him, was like, man, how have you written like, you know, 50 bestsellers and you've made hundreds of millions of dollars? And it's just like 1.25 pages a day.
Mm.
That's what he said. And he's like, you do 1.25 pages a day, you can write 1 to 2 books a year. And I've never forgotten that. It's really, really powerful.
And
So,
what you're speaking to, John, is something that all entrepreneurs know anyway, whether they adhere to it or not. And that's the magic, not power, well, power also, but the magic of consistency.
right,
And I'll like let me tell everyone out there, no matter how good of a writer you are, how good you know your topic, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, your first draft is supposed to suck. If it doesn't, good on you. But you should expect, like, you should not be deterred by that. That's the natural creative
right.
process. I didn't, again, like, I think I did a really good, strong effort on the last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need to read. But when I sat down then to write 3 words I used to sell 100,000 books, I didn't like the chapters when I first put them down. I loved them afterwards, but it took me time and effort to massage them and move chapters around and move the sequence and really view it as a song. Where does the chorus go? Where does the bridge go? This is not a book. This is an experience. Where does the first act go? Is this a second act? Really thinking of it in
Right.
this way, even though it was nonfiction.
Gotcha. So I have some like mechanical questions for writing a book that I'm just really curious too. Is, first off, is like, what made you decide to go more broad versus niche? Because that's like a fight that everybody has when they want to start a podcast, when they want to write a book, when they want to become a coach. They're just like, oh my God, what's the thing? Like, do I want to go broad? Do I want to go niche? Do I want to go ultra niche? Like, what thought did you put into that as you were writing your Law of Attraction book?
Well, it's funny because I see the value of niche. And by the way, I break so many rules. I see so many things and I know the way they're supposed to be done and I know the way experts say. Again, I designed my own book cover. Like what kind of psychotic does that? Like no, you hire someone to do it. No, I wanted to do it. So the reason I went with just with Law of Attraction was because that was the answer to my question of, what do I want to do? Now, keep in mind, that's a two-part requirement. Now that I answered of what I want to do, I realize that I have to be intelligent and responsible enough to make sure that I actually pull it off. Because
Right.
I mean, if you can pull off niche and you're inspired to do it, I think that's a wiser, more strategic decision. But if you're like me and like, well, it's this, and you decide that you can make it work, I kind of like, again, it sounds so cliche. And it's a horrible answer to give an entrepreneur who's looking for a specific, useful answer. But I
Sure.
really just followed my heart. I followed my gut. I followed my instinct. I followed what I was inspired to do.
No, I love that. I love that. So you had the title, you created the cover. Now, did you have help in writing it? Meaning like everything from editors? Did you have like mentors? Like what, like, or how much of this did you just do yourself? Like what was that process like?
So I'm an anomaly. Blah. I can't even say it. I'm so much
It's
of
a
an
hard word.
anomaly that I couldn't even pronounce it. I'm an anomaly. I'm also, I guess, a unicorn. And I'm also a control freak, although that's not unique to entrepreneurs. With the exception of mastering the audio files, I did everything myself. But not to paint a limit or paint like a lot of times, like we see ourselves growing up as either like the verbal guy or the math guy. I was always like the verbal, the reading, the writing type of thing. It's comfortable for me. So I don't advise other people to do it. And I found like 100 typos. Like I'm holding this is the first copy of 3 words I used to sell 100,000 books. I had to read through it in a hard copy, not on screen, and I found 100 typos, and I quickly fixed them and re-uploaded. So I copy edited, but I had to find my way through all the mistakes. It was just for me. I wanted my fingerprints over everything.
Gotcha. No, and for those listening that, aren't unicorns or anomalies, I mean, there's a lot of great companies. There's Book in a Box. There's like, I've even interviewed, man, his name's James Ryerson. He owns a company that like helped a lot of best-selling authors write their books, like Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. They wrote his book. I mean, that book sold million, I think, or more copies. So there's a lot of resources out there for people. But one of the things that I really think is fantastic that you've been able to do is sell a lot of books. And so
Mm.
assuming that people can figure out on their own what they want to write about, they can get on Google and look for the resources and they can structure and devote the time and understand the importance of writing a book. I want to kind of parlay into like, how do you get your message out there? How do you sell it? 100,000 is a lot of books, man. Like
Yeah.
I'd say what 99.9% of authors I think I read don't ever even sell more than like 1,000 copies of their book.
Yeah, and like if you believe Google and the article I read, it's basically like independent authors, of which I'm one, they'll sell 2 to 500 in the book's entire lifetime. A published, like in a major publisher, on average 2,000 to 5,000. So yeah, this is definitely like I recognize that it's and like wow. I'm still floored certain times. Um
Right.
so let me give you one thing from 3 words I use to sell 100,000 books, and it paints a perfect example of some of the things that I have done, of which I go into deeper detail. I call this basically my ultimate social media sales hack.
Okay.
So think about it. You're an independent author. You've got this book you want to sell, and you got to sell not just to your friends and family. Because come on, even the ones that love you, they're not going to read it. They're not going to. They got lives, right?
That's right.
You need to find strangers to sell this to, and let's assume that you don't have a lot of marketing money to spend. So you've got to find an organic way of doing this, right? Well, for me, this is the gift of not niching down, even though this could work for niche also. I went into Facebook and I found law of attraction groups. Now, some of them had 50,000 people and some had 2,000 people. And obviously, not all those people are going to do it. And what I did was I dropped value bombs in those groups. I would answer questions. I would teach new methods. I basically gave all, and by the way, I didn't have to come up with new stuff. I took my book and I didn't want to copy and paste, but I repurposed content. So
Right.
all the heavy lifting I already did. I just had to, massage it and make it consumable for post. And I dropped all these value bombs. And now people are probably thinking, well, Andrew, we know how Facebook groups work. You can't post and be like, by the way, I have a book. By the way, buy my thing. By the way, here's a link. No, I didn't do any of that. What I did was, without asking for anything in return, I dropped these insane value bombs to the point where people would be curious enough to click on my personal profile, which I was in control of. Meaning, I answered that law of attraction question that no other author seems to want to touch.
Right.
Someone is impacted positively from it, ideally. They click on my profile, and the first thing they see is the backdrop of, here's my book. Here's the Amazon link. By the way, it's on Amazon, so you don't have to buy it on some strange website. You're buying it on a reputable website. Here, it's got these 5, here, by the way, here are all the 5-star reviews I've gotten so far on Amazon. So I'm using social proof plus value first, all in an attempt to basically put my message out there and serve people before they've spent a single dime on me. That's been my attitude in a lot of different ways in how I market the book.
I'm so glad you said that. One of I wouldn't say neighbor, but he lives like 5 minutes from me, close friend of mine. I had him on the podcast 2 years ago, early stages. He owns several short-term rentals, and in the span of, no joke, under 2 years, he has created the largest short-term rental Facebook group in the world. There's like 50, 60,000 people in it. He speaks on events. I mean, he has built an 8-figure business in less than 24 months
Wow.
by doing that exact same thing. Like, he literally went into all these groups. And when I had him on the podcast, he said the exact same thing you did. He's just like, every morning from 6 to 8, I'll go in these groups and I'll look at all the questions that people have asked, and I'll just start responding to all of them. And then he's like, after 6 months of doing that, I started to realize that everybody had the same problem. So I created my own group. And I mean, like, he's like, I was hoping to get 10 members a week. And now it's like, 15 to 1800 a month or more joining the group. And I mean, it's just ridiculous what he built. And his strategy was the exact same thing that you are talking about, and just adding value, not asking for anything, attracting, law of attraction, right? Like attracting people. Most people, they're hunters, right? They're not fishermen. They chase down their prey instead of attracting them with, something of value. So I love that you said that, man. That's really, really, really cool. So do you have another book in mind yet, or what's next for you?
So I do. So here's my problem. I I am never in a shortage of ideas. There's 2 books and 2 products that I already have in my mind that I don't even know how it's going to work. But really, the next order of the day for me is, if for readers, 3 words I use to sell 100,000 books. If readers check that out, I might do some workshops. But in the end, again, I'm inspired by Todd McFarlane, who's done Spawn for 30 years. The last law of attraction book you'll ever need to read remains my primary thing. So I'm doing YouTube stuff. Like, I'm not sure when people hear this, but I've just published. I try to be very unique in my YouTube channel, where I'm not just doing typical law of attraction, but giving everyone a unique spin. So I just published a video called Tom Brady and the Law of Attraction. Like, I'm trying to, raise the bar and, take that YouTube channel, and no matter how many subscribers it ever gets, make it like a unique hub.
Yeah.
So that's the current order of the day. But really, John, like, it all depends on like where inspiration will take me next. If I decide to pivot or write another book or do whatever it might be, I'm keeping myself open-ended, but I'm also trying to keep myself focused and on point.
That's awesome. I love that. I just have a couple other mechanical, because
Yeah.
obviously if somebody wants more on how to sell a book, like just buy your damn book on
Please.
how to
And
sell
by the way, I
100,000
keep it
books.
the Kindle version's $4. And I don't say that to kind of like
Yeah.
oversell people. I want to make it affordable so that,
No, that's
anyone can spend $4.
super affordable. I mean,
Yeah.
I've always believed that books, I think it was Jim Rohn that used to teach this. He's just like, man, like you have somebody that distilled decades of their lives into 200 pages and have refined it, and put everything, like a huge chunk of their life in a book, and it takes you 2-3 hours to read it. Like, why wouldn't you read it? Like, just makes no sense. And so, like, $4, I mean, that's ultra valuable and worth it. My last couple of questions is just like, let's say you've written the book, you've drafted it, you've distilled it down. Like, what's like the main route that you go to publish your book? Do you find a publisher? Do you self-publish? How do you do it? Like, what was that process like for you?
Yeah. So obviously the challenging thing about this is everyone's going to have their own preferences and their own challenges also, because this, for someone that hasn't done it before, it feels that, and maybe even is, a
Mm,
daunting process. It's like, where do I go? And part of the questions, it's a philosophical thing. Like me, I have nothing personally against the major publishers. I just personally don't believe that they would help me. So I bypass that step. I couldn't tell somebody how to get a literary agent or how to get with a big, I mean, I could tell them how to try, but I can't guarantee a path to it because
yeah.
I didn't bother doing that. I went straight to, I said, you know what? Amazon is the biggest platform in the world, even though they're not everywhere. Like I can't, because I'm using Amazon, I can't get my book in airport stores, for example, but I don't care. Amazon is the biggest platform. They make the process easy. They take a piece of the action, but they are more than entitled to it for all the things that they do.
That's
They're the
exactly right.
ones that are printing the books and are shipping that out where I don't have to lift a single finger. So for me, I made it easy just by going with KDP, because it's the path of least resistance, and they'll give you instructions. They will give you like a template if you want to design your cover, if you want to hire someone to design your cover for you. Which, by the way, if you want someone to do your cover, John, like you were saying, research. You can go on Fiverr for certain things.
That's
I
right.
went on Fiverr to find the guy who mastered the audiobook for me.
Huh.
So it's really about realizing that, again, there's more than one way, but there's certainly a way out there that's a lot simpler and with a lot less resistance than you might realize of just getting it out there. The tools really are there. They really are accessible.
Got
Amazon
it.
is a very easy way of doing it, if nothing else.
Also, you said KDP. What is that? Is that
Yeah, so Kindle Direct Publishing. So it's
got it?
Amazon KD. Thank you for asking that. You see, by the way, you just pointed out something here. Sometimes even the people like that pride ourselves on being able to explain something, we will use jargon or terminology where we have not done the proper understand. Like, let me explain what that is. Something to keep in
Yeah,
mind when you write a book. Yeah, it's Kindle Direct Publishing. It's basically their publishing leg. That's
got it.
whether you have a Kindle version of the book or a paperback or a hardcover or all of them. Either one of those. If you type Amazon KDP into Google or just go to kdp.amazon.com, they Amazon knows what they're doing. They will make it easier for you to go through the process of putting a book up because they want to make money also.
That's awesome. I love that, man. This has been a very, very helpful interview. I want to finish it off with just showing people where to find your content. You have a YouTube channel, you have a website that is right there for anybody watching, awesomemarvelous.com. But can
Mhm.
you just share with everybody, like, what's the best place to connect with you, the best place to follow your content, the most up to date, and all of that, if you don't mind?
Yeah, well, I make it pretty easy. I give like a pay and a free option. And if you go to awesomemarvelous.com, you'll see again somebody who recognizes that he doesn't have the skill or the time to create a convoluted website. So I make a very easy website where there's easy links to the listings of both my books on Amazon, or my YouTube link is right there also. I mean, it's youtube.com/Andrew Kap, but where you can kind of see an example of how I actually use YouTube to get word out about my book, again, my personal style. So one link, whether you want to free content or you pull your wallet out, awesomemarvelous.com. If you are not
Awesome.
in the United States, you can just simply search your local Amazon or your local Audible or your local Apple Books for the audiobook for The Last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need to read, or Three Words I Use to Sell 100,000 Books.
That's awesome. And I just want to just like reiterate on top of it all that, law of attraction is such a powerful thing when done consistently. And I think most people don't have any sort of methodology or any kind of consistent action or practice, whether it be gratitude, whether it be envisioning the things that you want, even though every great leader in the last 1,000 years have preached this, everything from
Mm.
Tony Robbins to Socrates to Sun Tzu. I mean, it's just like, it's such a powerful concept that the greats have all known. And you have people like modern people like The Rock, that Kevin Hart, they preach these things even today. And a lot of people don't realize it. Like, they actually apply these principles day in and day out consistently. So I just think this was a great interview. I think it was absolutely relevant. Really appreciate your time, Andrew, man. You absolutely crushed it. And hopefully in the future, man, we can have you back on the show again, man, just to talk about more in depth on some of the things you shared today. So thank you.
John, thanks so much for having me. Would love to come back whenever you want me. And just props to you for having such a wonderful podcast and asking such great questions. You pulled some gold out of me, and I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.